Now, an investigation into the mysterious rise and fall of the barbarians known as Vikings. They conquered nature's fury at sea, and on land, shields and riveted ringed armor gave them the upper hand. Why did these raiders by design enjoy 2 centuries of success and then vanish? The secrets of the Viking warriors, right now on the National Geographic Channel. They were once the most feared men in Europe, an unstoppable band of ruthless warriors, Vikings. For 1,200 years, the Vikings have been famed for their bloodlust, their barbarism, their prowess in war. But how much of the image is actually true? New research now shows there's more to the Vikings than meets the eye. Through a series of unique experiments, we will discover how the Vikings used groundbreaking technology to conduct long-range seaborne raids, how the Vikings applied skills long since forgotten to the making of weapons, and how the Vikings hardwired themselves for a new kind of war. By recreating hardware and know-how that has lain hidden for 12 centuries, scientists aim to reveal the secrets of the Vikings. The story begins on an island off the coast of northern England, the year 793 AD. In the monastery of Lindisfarne, the monks were going about their devotions. The date was Saturday, June 8th. It was to become a day of infamy. Without warning, a group of ships appeared on the horizon. They were headed straight for the monastery. Suddenly, the ships were disgorging men. Armed raiders stormed ashore. The monks knew their assailants. They were traders from the lands of the far north, modern Scandinavia. History would come to call them by an ancient word for pirates: Vikings.
The word Viking is first recorded in an Old English document, and there the word piraticum, which means a pirate expedition, is translated Vikingaferð, which means a journey of Vikings.
In an orgy of violence, the Vikings ransacked the monastery and butchered the monks. No one was spared. The Vikings looted many priceless pieces of ecclesiastical treasure and simply disappeared. It was outrageous, it was audacious, and it must have been premeditated.
Lindisfarne was an extremely important site within the Kingdom of Northumbria. It was the seat of the major monastery of the Northumbrian kingdom, and the fact that the early Viking raids struck there cannot be coincidence. They must have known exactly where they were going and what they were doing.
But it was only the beginning. Raids on Scotland, Ireland, and France came next. The Saxon and Frankish world was suddenly under sustained assault. But what were the motives behind the Viking raids? Some historians believe the causes were purely economic. Gold hoarded by the church in Western Europe was a powerful lure. But others see a political motive. Europe was Christian, but the Vikings were not. And the biggest ruler in Europe, the Frankish Emperor Charlemagne, was waging a brutal war on the pagans of the north. Maybe the raids were a warning to the Christians to back off. Whatever the cause, one thing is certain. The raids triggered a chain of events that were to change the face of the world. Within 50 years, the Vikings had conquered most of England. Within 100 years, they had attacked the world's richest empire, Byzantium. Within 200 years, their ships had reached across the Atlantic to Greenland and the fringes of North America. The Vikings made an indelible mark on history. Yet the question remains, how did they pull it off? What secrets lie behind the incredible achievements of the Vikings? For medieval historian Sarah Foote, the answer may lie in the written accounts of the people who lived through the Viking Age. Her research has uncovered many valuable leads, clues to the genius at work behind Viking success. For her, the monastic writings of 1,200 years ago bring to life the awesome spectacle of the Vikings at full bore.
These are the Annals of St. Vast, and this is for the year 884. The Northmen never stopped enslaving and killing Christian people, bringing down churches, demolishing fortifications, burning down towns. For on every road lay the corpses of the clergy and laity, noblemen and commoners, women, youths and babies.
What stands out most from the contemporary sources is the sense of outrage that the first Viking raids provoked.
You get a very clear sense of the horror of this completely unexpected attack. I think for 8th century Christians all over Europe, this was almost their equivalent of 9/11.
But why the shock? The monks were Christian propagandists. In the wake of the attacks, they had an interest in portraying the Vikings as a plague from God. By reading between the lines, Foote begins to find clues to the secrets of Viking success. Militarily, it seems the Vikings were doing something new, something unstoppable.
The sources do suggest that there was something different about these raids, that this was a different sort of warfare. These attacks come seemingly from nowhere out of the sea, and that's what most attracts their attention. All the sources comment on the fact that these are sea-born warriors.
This is significant. If contemporary chroniclers describe the raids as different because they came from the sea, what did they make of the ships the raiders sailed in?
But there is a later 11th century account which talks about the elegant decorations on the keels that would dazzle the eyes of observers. You could see a flash of the glitter of armour, the fire of hanging shields. I'm sure this is a highly literary, embellished account, but the idea that these fleets were different from those that Europeans were producing, I think, is the important factor to get out of these texts.
Foote's exploration of contemporary accounts builds a vivid picture of the strengths of the Vikings and the weakness of the opposition. Coastal communities were unprepared and powerless against the sudden appearance of Viking ships. The longship was to assume an almost mythical status. The technology behind it was a wonder of the age. Coming up, 80 feet long, 16 feet wide and 32 men strong are the clues to the Viking success hidden in the hull. We'll return with more Secrets of the Vikings after this. We now return to Secrets of the Vikings on the National Geographic Channel. At the Viking Ship Museum in Oslo, Norway, stands an extraordinary example of Viking ship design. Protected by the clay in which it was buried, the ship has survived more than 1,100 years. They call it the Gokstad. It's named after the place where it was excavated in 1880. It's one of the largest Viking ships ever discovered.
The Gokstad is 24 meters long, which would give you about 80 feet, 5 meters wide amidships, 16 feet. Was rowed by 32 men, sitting 16 on each side.
The Gokstad had been used as a burial chamber and contained a wealth of Viking artifacts. But what does the Gokstad tell us about Viking maritime success? experts have long been fascinated by the design and construction of its hull. The first thing they noticed was how thin the hull planks were.
For a ship that size, they are very thin. They are about 2.5 centimeters thick, about 1 inch, which is not much for an 80-foot vessel.
The hull shape is also very distinctive, aerodynamic in appearance, relatively narrow, with a high prow. Experts like Arne Emil Christensen claim the construction and shape gave the Gokstad an immediate advantage: speed.
These very flexible light hulls have a tendency to plane, not like a modern speedboat, but in more or less the same idea. They lift on their own bow wave, and they get up to very great speed. They get more stable as the speed increases. Replicas of the Gokstad ship have logged over 16 knots, which is very fast for a sailing vessel.
It's an incredible thought. 1,000 years ago, the Vikings had ships that could plane across the water like a hydrofoil, thereby achieving speed phenomenal for the time. Here at a research tank in Southampton University, England, we put this concept to the test. The test tank holds a model of the Gokstad ship. The waves in the tank are set at a regular rate of 1 every 4 seconds, the equivalent of fine sailing conditions in the North Sea.